Hey, this is Andy Bradford again with LC Today, and we're here at the Strawberry Festival in Moulton, here at the Rec Center, with Mr. Butch Walker. Now, I know that most of y'all know that Mr. Walker is legendary when it comes to his knowledge and writing about the cultures here in North Alabama. So we want to spend a little time with him and just let him tell you all about some of the things that he's maybe done recently, or some of the things that are available here at the Strawberry Festival.
Well, Andy, I've got 17 books that I've written that's available here. They're also available on, you can search my name on the internet. Just go to Rickey Butch Walker, and you got to spell it with R-I-C-K-E-Y. But I've spent many years working on these books. Of course, I was working with the Lawrence County Board of Education for right at 33 years. 24 of those years I was with the Indian Education Program. And I think we started the Indian Education Program about 1986, and we had our first event over at the H.A. Alexander Park, which is just part of this park, of course. And so I retired in 2009, but while I was over the Indian program, I got to meet a guy from Montgomery, Alabama, Dr. Don Hines from Hines County, Mississippi, and he was the Assistant Director of ADECA. That's the Alabama Department of Economic and Community Affairs under Governor Guy Hunt. And he comes to the office one day and says, I heard you knew a little bit about the forest. And I said, well, I know a little bit. And so he said, well, how about taking me and my wife on a camping trip out there? So for 2 different weekends, we went out and camped in the wilderness area and hiked all over the place. And so one day I was in the office, we was in part of the old trade school building up here, you know,
yes,
in the old auto body shop, and I got a call, and Dr. Hines said, well, I'm in Washington, D.C., if I get the money, can you build a museum? And I said, sure, as long as it's like a Cherokee council house. He said, oh, I was thinking about a brick and steel building. I said, no, I want a 7-sided building that was designed by Henry Timberlake and William Bartram in the 1700s when they came through this part of the country, when it was Indian territory, when it was true Indian territory. And so from that little discussion, we got up with, involved with the Appalachian Regional Commission, the ARC. Tom Bevel was over it, and so Tom Bevel started funneling money into our program, and after about $300,000 of money, we got about 20-something acres of land and built that 7-sided museum in Oakland. And then before I left, we had bought right out 120 acres of land at Oakland Indian Mounds Park. And after I retired in 2009, I started putting a lot of emphasis on my books, writing. And for example, this book, the original book had a cover like this. This picture of me won Associated Press at Kinloch. And so this Warrior Mountains folklore book, I interviewed people for 5 years. I found the oldest folks I could find in the forest and interviewed them, got their stories. And I was telling the 2 ladies a while ago, Mr. Finest Treadaway, I interviewed him, and before the article come out in the paper, I did a series of articles called The Bankhead Back Trails in the Moulton Advertiser for several years. Before the article come out in the paper, he died. And had another gentleman, Mr. Jake Feltman. I was doing his story, and I went out and interviewed him and wrote up the story, and it was the next day or 2 days later, he wound up dying. So I got some of the last stories of people that lived in the forest for many, many years. One of the first books I did when I retired from the Board of Education was a book on Doublehead. When I started with the Indian program in '86, I started collecting information on Doublehead. So for about 25 or 30 years, I've collected a bunch of information, and some of the information had never been published. This book was one of the best sellers for 2 or 3 years on Amazon in Southern history. And so I was real proud of this book. It sold a bunch of copies, and this is one of the best books on Doublehead, who controlled this area, lived in this area. And the thing about this, he had a tremendous number of descendants that went in our Indian program at Hatton, and you may be kin to those. There's 2 brothers, Hezekiah Tharp and Robert Tharp Jr. married 2 sisters, Parthena Cobbert and Nancy Cobbert. And they had a bunch of kids that intermarried with the Vandevers, the Bradfords, the Trouts, the Yocums. There's a bunch of those families. So we had a bunch of kids in the Hatton School District that were directly descended from Doublehead. In the book I wrote about George Colbert. George Colbert married two of Doublehead's daughters. Dr. George Mellon wrote about Doublehead's marriage to Tuskegee Hutu and Salichi. In 1915, it was published in the Knoxville Sentinel. And so a lot of people think, well, where did you get all that information? It's just, it takes a lot of work. And then in the last few years, I did a series of books, and this is the last of the series, on the cotton plantations in northwest Alabama that was taken by the Turkeytown Treaty of 1816. This book is on Madison County. It's got 55 pages of tables in this book that has the planters and the number of slaves it had from 1809 through 1860, and it's listed the planters by alphabetical by last name. So all these books have this, and that doing all those census records and looking up all those numbers was a tremendous, it took a tremendous effort, besides writing the text of the book. This book, I think, is about 350 something pages. But anyway, I did a series. I did, this is Poplar Grove, which is a plantation of Leroy Pope. This is one of the first and the largest antebellum plantations built in Mississippi Territory and in the state of Alabama. Of course, Alabama became a state and became a territory in 1817, and on December 16, 1819, it became a state. But this is Poplar Grove with Leroy Pope. This one is the this is Westview. This David Burleson still lives in this house. It was built by his great-grandfather Jonathan Burleson in 1841. This is just north of Hartsville. This is about the Morgan County book. This is the Robert Beatty House at Athens. This is actually Founders Hall, where they have the Fiddlers Convention at Athens State. This one, of course, you're probably familiar with Rock Hill Castle. This was James Edmund Saunders' home, and it was bulldozed down, I think, in 1962 by the Cross family. But the brick was used in 3 different houses, one at Mud Tower, and I think there's 2 houses in Decatur that was used, the brick. This is Belmont, which is still standing in Colbert County, off of this, I think it's got a Tuscumbia address, but this is about Franklin County. And this book is, of course, about Lauderdale County. This is The Forks of Cypress by James Jackson. So, you know, I've been interested in the history of a lot of these places.